Welcome to Burn the Ship, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs go all in on their business, and we introduce them to professionals that can help them to do so. Today, we have a very special guest. Vincent, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Roderick.
Excellent, excellent. Please introduce yourself and your business to the people.
Sure. My name is Vincent Catanzaro. The name of my business is Renée Vincent Executive Placement.
Excellent, excellent. Vincent, we understand that time is one of our most valuable resources, so go ahead and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. I'm originally from New York City. I'm a Bronx kid. I went, probably the second person in my family to go get my college degree. Got that down to University of Central Florida. First day I moved to Florida, met my future wife.
Okay.
Got graduated. 2 weeks later, got married. A couple days ago, celebrated our 32nd wedding anniversary.
32nd, that's amazing. Congratulations
Thanks.
on that. Now, I got to stop you for a second. New York, Bronx. So is it Giants or Jets, or is it Mets or Yankees?
Man,
Jump into the good stuff.
This is terrible. So it is. So I'm a Jets fan, lifelong Jets fan. I this year I didn't go to a game, but
Okay.
I almost always travel to go to a Jets game.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm from the Bronx, which would typically mean you're a Yankees, Giants guy.
Yeah.
In the 80s caught on with like the sack exchange and the Jets and then the Mets in the 80s. And so I ended up being kind of a new wave fan. Mets, Jets, Islanders. The Islanders were great in the 80s.
Yeah.
As I got older, and have a big family, I have 6 children, the pro sports watching narrowed down basically to the NFL. Although I'm friends with the chief legal officer of the New York Mets, and she's wonderfully hosted me to a couple of games for the Mets. And,
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, that's a good deal. I always think that's important because anyone from New York, I have to ask that question, which one are you? Now, you said you went down to Florida, you met your future wife. Did you jump right into corporate? Tell us a little bit about what happened.
Right into recruiting. Didn't know about recruiting as an industry. So I graduated in '92,
Okay.
and it was like, what do you I remember this specifically. Go to work for something that you believe in. So like, what do I believe in? I don't know. I like Coca-Cola.
Yes.
So maybe I believe in Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
So at the time, I had to go to the library and research executives at Coca-Cola because there was no internet for me to go and find that stuff.
Right.
And I sent off all these letters to these execs at Coca-Cola. Did my job search in Atlanta. My wife's family was from Atlanta. I didn't want to stay in Orlando because outside of hospitality, Orlando's pretty small.
Okay.
And so I did my job search up here, got interviews with Coca-Cola, and just while I was up here interviewed for Stephen Bisciotti, the owner of the Ravens.
Yes.
His company was Aerotech, Tech Systems, Legis Group, self-made billionaire. Interviewed for his company back when they were pretty small, about $115 million a year business, and went to work in recruiting, technical recruiting, back in '93.
Okay. So you've been in this industry specifically, so you have tons of knowledge when it comes to
Yeah, I've been in it for a long. I'm old, right? I've been into it. Been in it for a long time. So.
We call it experience.
Experience, mature.
Yes. We don't call each other old or young around here.
Okay.
It's just everyone has their own experience. So with that, when you jumped into it, did you start your own company back then, or did you work under some other people? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the old Aerotech experience was very entrepreneurial, so they drive entrepreneurship into you, right? And kind of, we outworked everyone. I used to joke, we were like the Marine Corps of staffing. We were young, really didn't know what we were doing, but man, we outworked everybody, right? That was kind of the model. And that was, that left a lasting impression. So my journey transitioned in 2000 from recruiting over to commercial real estate development. And I met a commercial real estate developer, went to work for a commercial real estate developer. A few years later, went out on my own, started developing real estate here locally in Atlanta. And the circle continues because the guy that hired me out of college, who was a direct report to Stephen Bisciotti, became my deep pockets investor in real estate. So we rode that real estate wave into the Great Recession, which then ended my real estate career and eventually circled back 2012 back into recruiting. So after about a decade in commercial real estate, and that unwinding from the Great Recession took all the way to end of 2016, right? For that last 4 or 5 years, 2016 to 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, 2031, 2032, 2033, 2034, 2035, 2036, 2037, 2038, 2039, 2040, 2041, 2042, 2043, 2044, 2045, 2046, 2047, 2048, 2049, 2050, 2051, 2052, 2053, 2054, 2055, 2056, 2057, 2058, 2059, 2060, 2061, 2062, 2063, 2064, 2065, 2066, 2067, 2068, 2069, 2070, 2071, 2072, 2073, 2074, 2075, 2076, 2077, 2078, 2079, 2080, 2081, 2082, 2083, 2084, 2085, 2086, 2087, 2088, 2089, 2090, 2091, 2092, 2093, 2094, 2095, 2096, 2097, 2098, 2099, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, lawsuit on a piece of property that went into receivership with the FDIC
Yes.
to settle.
Okay.
That was like death by spoon.
Yeah, I was about to say that sounds like a wild journey. That's a long time. That's like 8 years or so.
It was like our bank got shut down by the FDIC in 2009.
Okay.
And it ended right before 2017.
Oh my goodness gracious! During that time, it seems like it was a lot that was going on, and I know you wanted to hold on to it because it seems like you're passionate about whatever it is that you got into. What is it that made you say, "Okay, I am absolutely done with this, and I'm going back to recruiting"?
So in 2009, 2010, I was just a non-money making father of 6, streamlining, like felt like I was losing everything. Yes. I didn't really lose anything but the business, but it was a really tough year, and I had to find a job, and I ended up getting a job, W-2 job, because I was an entrepreneur, right? So I found an executive role with a real estate services firm. And I had the worst job in the country. So my job during the Great Recession, right? Okay. I managed a portfolio of foreclosed, occupied real estate of like any given day, about 4,800 homes. Oh, and I ran, it was really an operations role because I was at, 30,000 foot level, but I ran eviction, cash for keys, and the sale of occupied homes.
Oh, man.
During that time period, which I needed the job, so I was thankful to have the income to support the family.
Yeah.
But I'd go home and be like, if people knew what I did for a living, I'd be like the most hated man in America.
Yes.
So, spinning out of that, an opportunity with old relationships back into recruiting. So went back into recruiting, and recruiting is one of the you would understand this. Business development. I don't want your sales team to hear this, but business development is right. Like people hire you.
Yes.
Right. They were hiring Vince. They weren't hiring whatever name I was. I wasn't representing IBM. Yeah. Right. Where they're hiring IBM. Right. Whatever firm I was representing, they were basically hiring me.
Yes.
And I think I just always had the entrepreneurial spirit, and so when it came time to start looking again, I got introduced to executive recruiting. I was running global talent acquisition for an education technology company called Promethean. Super cool company. I loved that company. I loved working for them. And they were purchased by a Chinese company, moved their headquarters to Seattle, so I knew my time was winding down. And, there was a lot of executive changeover. So we hired one of the big brand name executive recruiting firms, and I would go home and be like, can you believe we're paying $150,000 for them to get this person for us? Yes. I told my boss we were going to hire this person in Singapore, and we were paying, I don't know, like $125K to help with that hire. I was like, you give me $125,000, I go to Singapore, I find the person, I'll bring him back with me.
Okay.
Right? That's what I would do for, right?
Okay.
And so...
did they take you up on that?
No, they did not take me up on that. But, when I started researching, and I started meeting with executive recruiters, local executive recruiters here in Atlanta. I met a bunch of folks, a bunch of great people. I have a couple relationships that I still have. And they started talking about the business. Hey, if you hustle, how does it work? What's the deal? Kind of got, some scoop about it. Started talking to my wife about, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. So I have a big family, 6 kids. My wife worked as a very successful professional young, but at some point by child number 4 became a full-time stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
And now the kids were getting older, so, she was... more available, and so I was trying to figure out what do I call my business. I couldn't come up with anything. All the kind of the generic names were taken, right? Nothing was hitting me. And it was during COVID. It was remember here in Georgia when we had supposed to be 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That was 2 months, and then we kind of opened and then closed again. Yes. During that quick opening, I was at the mall with my son and a friend of his. And the only thing open at the mall was Chick-fil-A, and they were eating Chick-fil-A, and I'm just kind of hanging out there. And it was just inspired, right? Called God inspired, right? It was you need to call this business Renée Vincent, and you need to get your wife to do it with you. Okay. And so I went home, and I was like, I have an idea.
Yeah.
And I pitched the idea to my wife, and it was funny because she had said for for her 50th birthday, she wanted a Rolex. She always wanted a Rolex. I'm like, a Rolex? Are you crazy? I was like, use your phone like everyone else, right? And but then my dad had just passed away right in the beginning of 2020, and I inherited his Rolex.
Okay.
And so I know that was a little sore spot for my wife, who I didn't buy a Rolex for her 50th birthday, and she didn't have one. So I pitched this idea, and she's like, well, you know, I gotta get a Rolex if I could be hanging out with all these executives. And I was like, that's such a great idea. With your very first placement, go buy yourself any Rolex you want.
That's right.
And she did.
Okay.
And she liked the idea, and literally we incorporated like a month later. I was working, right? And we incorporated a month later, and then started to buy computer. I didn't want to do any of the work associated with preparing for this on my company's technology. So we bought our computers and just kind of got set up and went live January 5th. 2021.
2021.
21st day in business.
Man, I'm telling you, that's awesome that you were able to persevere through all of those things. Anyone that was in that real estate around that 2008, 9,
it was brutal.
Dark
days.
My heart goes out to you guys because I know things were flowing and then they were not flowing, and it was no real sight, of what's going on. But it's great that you were able to rebound. And now that we're here at this timeline of your journey, I want you to tell us all about the business. So tell us, who are you looking to get in front of? Who would be a great referral for you? Who's that ideal client that you're looking to meet?
Yeah, so my experience, I kind of grew up in tech recruiting. That's good. So I do a lot of technology recruiting, right? The when we were building the business, and we kind of built separate business plans for my wife and I, because she had this mortgage lending background from her youth and really understood mortgage lending and finance, and so we kind of built a target list for her, and that worked well, right, for her. And I decided to pursue, instead of pursuing tech, I wanted to pursue private equity. Okay. Right, and private equity is very similar to real estate development because you're buying a business, you're improving the business, and in many cases then preparing to then resell the business or profit off of the new business that you built, right? Yes. Similar to buying a piece of land, coming up with a plan, improving that land, and then selling it, right? So there was some similarities in there, and I just started calling private equity folks and started to get business, and some of my tech relationships gave me business, right? And so I had business pretty quick. It took 9 months for the first check to come in, before we finally received income.
Yes.
But those last 4 months of the year were good and paid for the year, so we were able to pay for that year. And, and then since then it's been just constantly getting a little bit better as we go along. So that's it's gone really well. But we. Private equity, the folks that I talk to, CEOs of private equity companies or board members of private equity companies or investors, right? Because we're trying to fill roles, either for the CEO at the C-suite or the CEO role itself from, dealing with who are really the deal makers who are putting those private equity deals together.
Makes a lot of sense. So for yourself, do you have like a pool of those people, or let's say a PE company says, hey, I need this, and you actually go to Singapore and find them or wherever and find those people? Is that what you're doing right now?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's always, I have a vast network, right? Okay. So I've been in recruiting, from my early years to, again, since 2012 for a long time. I have a very deep and robust network, but every search is unique, right? So one of the unique things that we do about our business is we use some science, right? And so we kind of just take that next level of doing assessments and trying to understand drivers that, what motivates people, how do they respond to pressure, are they naturally introverted, extroverted, are they, collaborative, are they independent, how formal are they more big picture thinking, right? And so those are the kinds of things that we figure out with our candidates, and then use a little bit of science with our customers to get them engaged. The key to the science is getting control of the process. So if you've interviewed people, Roderick, right, and I'm sure you have interviewed a lot of people.
Yes.
I would say that this is a common challenge. And I'm sure everyone's industry feels the same way, but my industry is like so broken, which leads to opportunities for me because it's like such a goofy, it's so weird. Like it's never changed from like the dawn of time.
Okay.
Hiring is
Yes.
still the same, you know, even with the job boards, right? The job descriptions are kind of the same. Everyone just does everything the same. It's kind of weird. So but you know, we get control of it because, like, how many times have you interviewed? Let's say there's 4 stakeholders, 4 people doing the interview, right? And so candidate A comes in, and Roderick and Susie like candidate A, but Joe and Betty didn't, right? And then candidate B comes in, and another kind of mix. But you're not really the person they're working for. You're just part of the interview team. So by the time candidate 5 comes in, you're telling Joe, hey, if you like candidate 5, I think you should hire candidate 5, right?
Yes. Let's get this over with.
But maybe candidate B, or I went from B's to 5s. But anyways,
it's fine.
We went through the alphabet plus. Now we're on numbers, and so so you know, maybe that second candidate to come through was really the right candidate, but because although everyone knows the title and the job function of what they're looking for, who they see doing the job, the personality, the person that they're working with doing the job, they may not see that the same. And that's where the process gets broken at the very beginning. And then you don't end up hiring who you should hire. So like our process is about every step of the way, from understanding, and we have to be able to speak to the opportunity as if we're internal. Right? So like we need to know everything about the opportunity, right? And then when, you know, how we put a job description together, an opportunity description together, right? And really understand how to approach our target market with this opportunity. Many things we do are confidential, so it requires NDAs to be signed as we're working with candidates. And so even from our reach out and to then talking to people and qualifying people, right? Every step of the process, right? If you can do it a little bit better, if you just do that a little bit better, you're constantly improving your opportunity to have a successful hire. And that's really what it's all about. And so, you know, we're not like a huge shop, right, where, hey, we're placing 1,000 people a year, right? You know, we're making 10 placements a year. Right? That's kind of like, you know, our rhythm. So every one of them is super important. And you know, when every relationship we make, you know, and in our case, because it's executive recruitment, every candidate is a prospective customer as well at some point. Right?
That makes sense.
So how we treat candidates and the hand-holding of candidates, we did buyer personas when we're starting the business, right? So, you know, we were pretty detailed about how we wanted to do things. And so when we interviewed candidates of executive recruiting firms, they're like, you know what? Recruiters are all over you when they need you. And as soon as they don't need you, they ghost you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so it was a conscious decision of, we're not going to do that. We're not going to be the people who don't follow back up with candidates.
Yes,
we're going to close the circle with every candidate. We're going to keep those relationships alive with every candidate. And so that's something that we take a lot of pride in. I'm sure it's not perfect, but you know, we really make the concerted effort to, you know.
Yeah, those are 2 big differentiators. As you were explaining your story, it seems like your discovery from the actual company is what helps to start the foundation of what it is that you do, instead of just saying, hey, look, I'm going to get you an executive. You sound like you dive deep into what that actual company needs. And that helps you with the search. And because you don't just say, all right, see you never again, candidate A, and you actually stay in contact with them, it helps if another position pops up because you've already spoken to this person, already sent them through those assessments. Those seems like 2 big things that will set you apart with your firm. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, that's true. In my wife's business, excuse me, is a little bit different than mine. And then we kind of run our own desk and, you know, have our own customers. She ended up really doing some fractional recruiting for a big customer in New York that went well, and has looked at other opportunities doing similar work where, hey, we're going through a big growth spurt. We don't have, our human resources organization is not of the maturity level yet where we have a recruiting organization or a talent acquisition organization, and we need, at least for a temporary period of time, for someone to come in and represent talent acquisition for a fast growing company. And my wife has done that a couple times very successfully. And it's gotten a little bit of a reputation of being able to do that as well. Yeah. So it's a little bit diverse. I've recently, one of my customers 2 years ago bought a restaurant group, and I had never recruited in restaurants before, but I placed the VP of finance for that. And then he bought another restaurant group. We placed the CEO and the VP of finance for that one. And one of his board members, who's the CFO of a restaurant group, is like, hey, I like these candidates. Can you hire me a candidate for my restaurant group? And so they hired another candidate. And then through that network, they referred me to another restaurant group. And I just placed the operations leader for another restaurant group. So restaurants have become a big part of my business here in the last 18 months, where I had never recruited in that industry before.
Yeah, as the entrepreneurs that are watching today, what I'm listening at you say is your process. Your process is in place and in order, so you can switch from tech to executive to hospitality. It doesn't seem like it matters what industry because of your process.
The process is consistent, and it's and it's. I think a lot of it has to do with your maturity of understanding business, right? Because like you had to understand I always tell people, when they're job searching, you have to be able to articulate your value statement to your target audience in their words. What are they looking for, not what you think you can do for them? I don't know if that makes sense. And so like even on my LinkedIn profile, my lead in my LinkedIn profile, my header is maximizing private equity profitability. Okay. That's what I do.
Yes.
Right? So if you're an investor in private equity and you want to make sure that this investment is successful, I help you do that. Now, I help you do that through talent, right, and through human capital. But every service provider, in theory, is trying to do that same thing. But my customer is thinking about, okay, I'm making an investment. I need to maximize how I do this.
That's right.
Right. And that's my lead, right? So those are the things that we think about and really make sure we understand. To understand the equity model. A lot of these job roles come with equity in the company, right? And how does that equity work? And they're all different, right? Everyone does it a little bit different. So you have to understand that, be able to articulate that, those kinds of things.
Excellent. I definitely appreciate you sharing your journey about, some of those things that you had to go through to overcome. One of the biggest things is, along with all of those ups and downs, you got 6 kids. So that is a whole nother thing in itself. And you've been able to balance that and still make it through. And you have acquired so many skills, I'm confident. Do you mind sharing a couple of those skills with the audience today so they can just have a better thing that they can add to their mix and possibly help with the growth of their business?
Yeah. So what I spend a lot of my time doing is a lot of people get referred to me. Executives get referred to me, or they find me on LinkedIn, they reach out to me, and so I'll take those calls, and they'll be either in job transition for the first time in a long time, or think something's coming up, and so I do a lot of, I don't charge for this, but I do a lot of coaching around career preparedness, and what I do is I basically take people down the path of go-to-market strategy. What is your go-to-market strategy, right? So, Roderick, right, this is your opportunity, right? You don't have many of these opportunities. It's like being a free agent in sports, right? You got to maximize this opportunity. And let's say let's keep numbers simple. Let's say your comp package $250K a year, right? You're going to work somewhere for 5 years, right? I got to do my math right, but that's $1.25 million, right? That's a transaction.
I see what you mean.
You're about to acquire $1 million transaction.
Okay.
Right? $1 million plus transaction. So what attention would you put into, now that you're looking at it as $1 million transaction, not just getting a job.
Yeah.
Right? Now you're pursuing, it's $1 million transaction paid out over several years.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's kind of like hitting the lottery.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
That'd be
the
awesome.
so how do you what would you do to get ready to acquire a $1 million plus opportunity? Right? You wouldn't just throw your resume together and put it on LinkedIn and right, and hope wait for people to call you, right? Like you'd be much more strategic, and you'd identify your target audience. And when I tell people about target audience, I was like, there's only one Roderick, right?
Yes.
You don't need to sell yourself 1,000,000 times, right, to make money, right? So you should know your target audience by identifying the person's name, right? Because it's the same thing. It's all if you don't know where you're going, you can't get there.
That's right.
Right?
That's
So I try to explain this to one of my children. So my children growing up vacationing in Brevard County, Florida. My wife grew up in Brevard County in the beaches, and so we go down to the beaches all the time. And so I was sharing with one of my daughters who was, she just kind of lets life happen to her versus taking charge of it.
Proactive.
And I was like, if I passed and you knew I buried $1 million in cash in Brevard County, would you be able to find it? She's like, well, I would try to think of where you would try to bury it, and at least try. But man, that'd be really hard to figure out where you buried it.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, well, if I told you I buried it next to one of the piers in Gleason Park, which is this little park that you would have to be a local to know, right? And buried it there, would you be able to find it? She's like, yeah, of course. I'll just go right to it and get it.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, exactly, because you know where you're going.
That's right. That's
so you had to know the destination, and clearly where it is you're going to go, and for whatever reason, people don't think about their career that way. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's I call it the path of little resistance. Some people take the path of least resistance, but most people put some effort into finding their next. I'm guilty of this. Work their network, through their friends. Hey, there's an opportunity. Let me get you in touch with this person. They're looking for someone, and the next thing you know, you have your next job.
Yeah, you got
right?
it. Yes.
And so that's kind of how it mostly happens. But I think the people who are really game changers, they set their path. And they set their destination. And what I tell everyone, right, is that anything's possible, right? Like as species, human beings, everything in this studio, right down to our bodies, to the walls, to the technology, comes from the elements of the earth, right?
Yes.
And we as human beings pull out of the elements of the earth, whatever we can imagine.
Yes, that's
right?
fact.
Like
that's fact.
That's just the way it works. And so whatever that dream is, that goal is, and that's the hard part, is kind of figuring that out. And I tell people to journal.
Yeah.
You should journal, right? To start having a journal for your career.
Okay.
And just put some bullet points in there every once in a while, and keep reading it and keep bullet pointing, and sooner or later that'll evolve into a vision.
Right.
And then once you just tell the story of that vision, then getting there is just building a plan.
Yes.
Right? So
yes. Makes a lot of sense. It sounds like what you're trying to share is you got to think with the end in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to have something to go for. I have used something similar to that with the crew out there. I said, hey, how do you know where to tell the GPS to go if you don't know where you're going? As you're setting your goals, you got to know where we're going, because I can't lead you on a path to you don't know where. Right. We're just going to go from here to Seattle just to get to Marietta, because I don't know where I'm taking you. So I didn't really think about that, how it's very important, especially in your industry, to know what is next in your career so you can know how best to place people. So that's a magnificent thing.
And that's true for everybody. I always joke about it, but I always try talking truths, right? Like everything any advice I give, right? I try to give, what is a principle,
yes,
right? What always works,
right?
And it's a principle that you need to know where you're going.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, when it seems so obvious, but for whatever reason, like very few people do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to share that because people need to hear that. I mean, because they may have heard it from somewhere and they may have heard it from somewhere else, but maybe you sharing it today will help that light click on. You know how I can tell somebody something 15 times and then they hear it from one other person. They're like, oh,
Of course.
you know what? That was magnificent. I was like, I've said it 50 times. What are you talking about? But I appreciate you sharing that. Now, you've told us a lot. You've pulled back the onion. You told us about some of those ups, some of those downs. Now I want to talk about, Vince as just human, not executive placement extraordinaire. So let's just say you've placed those 10 people that you try to place for the year. You've done it consistently, and time, money is not a concern at all. What is it that Vincent would do with his time if he had a little bit more of it?
Yeah, so I think we're as where we are in life, we're kind of heading there anyways, right? We're definitely in the back end of our careers, right? The kids are growing up. We have grandchildren these days, and so I think for me, it's I qualify for my Italian citizenship. So I think one of the things that I'm going to do is get my Italian citizenship. Maybe get a condo in Italy. My in-laws recently passed. My wife has lost her parents here in the last 18 months, and so she didn't inherit the house fully, but we're buying her brother out on a home down in Florida. It's a little beach house, and so I think it's kind of continuing that path. I don't think I'd be dropping the ball and checking out of society. I think finishing up and redoing the house in Florida, looking at a place in Italy, and eventually selling our place here, right? And maybe traveling a little bit more. But I don't ever see unplugging from work. I picked up a late in life hobby. So I'm a music enthusiast.
Okay.
Right? So I love music, and I have this stage played electric guitar. I did this experience with one of my daughters at a Kiss concert. We went backstage and met the band and got the guitar signed. And after the concert, we picked it up. He played it, signed it, we picked it up, and I had that mounted over my desk. And but I don't play guitar, right? So my wife's like, "That's so stupid that you have a guitar that you don't even play guitar." So I started taking lessons. This a little under 2 years ago, and have been learning how to play guitar. It's slow, a little bit frustrating, but it's just now starting to come together where
but if
to make sense.
If I brought one in, you could play a song or two.
I could play some.
Okay.
Yeah, I could play some.
Okay.
But I the stuff I'm playing is kind of the 80s, 70s, and 80s hard rock. Right?
Okay.
So
okay.
You'd have to know the genre. But funny. I'm working on a song right now called "The Last in Line," which was a Ronnie James Dio song.
Okay. Not familiar with that one, but I can't wait to hear you play it.
Yeah. So
I definitely appreciate you sharing, not just about your business journey, but your personal journey. And to the people that are watching today, if they had more questions about the executive placement or some of the skills that you shared today, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Definitely LinkedIn. I'm a very active LinkedIn user. My last name, Catanzaro, so this will make it rememberable, right? So Catanzaro is the capital city of Calabria, which is the southern state of Italy. Okay. So if you ever look at Italy and look at the big cities in Italy, right, it's right before you get to Sicily. Catanzaro is the big city. So that's how you spell my last name. First name is Vincent. Renée Vincent, executive placement. We're very active on LinkedIn. That's definitely the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. And we appreciate you coming on and sharing those things. And we always honor our guests by giving them the last word. Please look over there at your camera and tell the people something good.
Faith, right? Faith leads to grace. And all of the good things that God has for us is grace. And so faith is built into us, and just engage your faith and live in grace.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on
Thank
today,
you.
Vincent. And to everyone that is watching, thanks and be kind.